Jai Hind, dear students. I'm Dr. Preeti Mittal, and today we are going to start with the chapter Cell, the fundamental unit of life. A cell is known as a structural and functional unit of an organism. But why is it called so? A cell is known as a fundamental unit because a cell has a capability of performing all the functions that are performed by an organism. For example, respiration. Each and every cell of our body performs respiration, digestion of food, take up of food, then utilizing that food, apart from that, excreting out the waste. So, all the functions that are performed by an organism are performed by each and every cell of that particular organism. And that is why the cell is known as a basic structural and functional unit of an organism. Apart from that, there are some cells which have the capability of existing as independent cells that is present in the unicellular organisms. Means a unicellular organism like amoeba can perform all its function, carry out its entire life just with a single cell that it is having. Okay, so we'll read about all that, but let's start with basic things like who discovered the first cell. So the first cell was discovered by Robert Hooke. But Robert Hooke did that with a very simple microscope. And the cell that he discovered was a dead cell because that was from the cork. Cork is something that is found in the bark of tree. So the bark of tree, the outermost portion of the tree, so that is made up of dead cells, and that is having the cork. So from that cork, the first cell was observed for the first time by Robert Hooke, and he only gave the term as cell. In Latin, cell means a small room, a little room. So this term cell was also given by Robert Hooke. Then, Robert Hooke, he discovered this cell that was by his self-made microscope. So he constructed a microscope on his own and just observed the cell. So isn't it amazing? Then the first living cell was observed by Leeuwenhoek. Anton von Leeuwenhoek was a scientist who observed the first living cell in pond water. He observed that cell. Okay. Then Purkinje scientist was there who coined the term protoplasm. Now, what is protoplasm? Protoplasm means the nucleus that is present inside a cell and the cell cytoplasm. So, nucleus and cytoplasm of the cell together make up the protoplasm. So, this term was coined by Purkinje. Apart from that, who discovered the nucleus? So, the discovery of nucleus was made by Robert Brown. Remember, the first cell was Robert Hooke and the nucleus inside the cell was discovered by Robert Brown. Okay. Then, Schleiden and Schwann were two scientists who gave the cell theory. They told us something about the cell, and that cell and that whatever they told, that is known as cell theory. So remember that Schleiden and Schwann were two botanists who gave us the cell theory. But the cell theory was further explained by Virchow. Okay. So what does the cell theory states? According to the cell theory, all the organisms, whether it is unicellular or multicellular, is made up of cells. It could be a single cell in case of unicellular organisms. It could be many cells in case of multicellular organism. Okay. So each and every organism is made up of cells. Second point is that each and every organism starts its life journey as a single cell. So every organism, whether it's human beings or it's plants, that all starts their journey as a single cell. And third point, every cell arises from the pre-existing cells. So if a new cell has to be formed, that will be formed from some pre-existing cells. Okay. Next was that every organism, this cell is a basic structural and functional unit of an organism. Means every cell is capable of doing the basic functions that an organism performs. So this is all the 4 points of the cell theory. Now, these cells could be, the organisms could be divided as unicellular or multicellular based on the number of cells that they have in their body. An organism, if it is having a single cell only, that is known as unicellular organism. But if an organism is having many cells like plants, human beings, dog, cat, elephant, tiger, whatever we see around us, all the higher animals, they are all known as multicellular organisms because they are made up of more than one cell. So the organisms could be classified as multicellular or unicellular based on the number of cells that they are having in their body. Apart from that, the cells are sometimes able to change their shape. Some cells are like that they can change their shape. For example, amoeba. Amoeba is a unicellular organism. It just has a single cell and it can move about, it can change the shape of its cell, and that cell is able to change its shape. But there are certain other cells which are not able to change their shape, which have a fixed shape, like the nerve cell in our body. The nerve cell or neuron that we have in our body, they are not able to change their shape. They have a fixed shape. So, a cell could be like having the capability of changing its shape or not having the capability of changing its shape. Okay. We'll move on further. We'll just start with the study of plasma membrane. But before that, if you want, you can take a screenshot so that you will be having everything at one place, especially the discoveries. Okay. So, we'll continue. I'll just raise it off. Now, we'll study about the cell components. Every cell is made up of a cell membrane, that is the outermost covering, and apart from that cell membrane, the cell has many cell organelles. Organelles are the small structures which are found inside the cell. So one by one we are going to study about different cell organelles, but starting with the outermost layer present in the cell, that is the plasma membrane. So, every cell has an outer layer around it, and this layer is known as plasma membrane. What is this layer called? Plasma membrane. Inside the plasma membrane, inside the cell, you will find that there is a nucleus. We'll talk about it. Then there is cell cytoplasm. And in the cytoplasm, we will see that there are many cell organelles. Various cell organelles are there that we are going to study. But first, right now, we'll be studying just about the plasma membrane. So, by this diagram, by this study, you can estimate that everything that has to come inside the cell or whatever has to pass out of the cell, that is going to pass through the plasma membrane. So, anything that will be coming inside the cell or exit from the cell, that will be passing through the plasma membrane. This plasma membrane is made up of proteins and lipids. This is very important. Remember that it's made up of proteins and lipids. Later on, I'll tell you that from where we are getting these proteins and lipids. But remember right now that this plasma membrane is made up of proteins and lipids that form this plasma membrane. This plasma membrane is semi-permeable. Semi-permeable means it will allow some things to pass through it and it won't allow some other things to pass through it. Okay. Now coming to a very important topic, that is diffusion. What is diffusion? Movement of solutes from a region of higher concentration to a region where its concentration is low, that is known as diffusion. So whenever any solutes is going from a region where it's in high amount to a region where it's low, that is known as diffusion. By the process of diffusion only, oxygen and carbon dioxide, apart from that, nutrients and waste material move in and out of a cell. I'll show you how. So, a cell requires oxygen, and during the process of respiration, every cell produces carbon dioxide. Now, every cell is surrounded by blood capillaries. These are blood capillaries which are having the oxygenated blood in them. So, oxygen is there in this blood capillaries. This oxygen moves into the cells through the plasma membrane. Because oxygen concentration is high in blood capillaries, so it will go inside the cell where it is less oxygen is there, where there is less concentration of oxygen. Apart from that, carbon dioxide from the cell comes into the blood capillaries because these blood capillaries are having oxygenated blood. So all the carbon dioxide is removed from that. So what will happen? The carbon dioxide concentration is more in the cell. So the carbon dioxide will move from its region of higher concentration to the capillaries where there is less concentration of carbon dioxide. Similarly, nutrients like glucose, amino acids will go inside the cell from the blood capillaries, and the waste material, whatever waste is produced inside the cell, that is the nitrogenous waste, that is urea, whatever nitrogenous waste is produced by the cell, that will be going into the blood capillaries. So this movement of material, this movement of solutes across the plasma membrane from a region of higher concentration to a region where the concentration of these solutes is less, that is occurring by the process of diffusion. This process is known as diffusion. Similarly, water also moves from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration. Means water moves from the area where water is in higher proportion to a region where water proportion is low. Means where water is more, from there it is going to move to the area where water is less. जहाँ पे ज्यादा पानी है वहां से वो इस एरिया में मूव होगा जहां पर पानी कम है. And that process of movement of water across the plasma membrane is known as osmosis. So when the solutes or the gases are moving across the plasma membrane, that process will be known as diffusion. But when this diffusion process is followed by water, means the water is moving in and out of the plasma membrane, we give it a special term that is known as osmosis. That is movement of water from the area of higher concentration, higher water concentration, to an area of lower water concentration. That is known as osmosis. Okay. Now, because of osmosis only, we see many phenomena that occur, and there are different conditions that will explain us osmosis. So let's see to those conditions now. First condition, we'll see all these conditions with some daily life examples that will make your learning to be easier. So what happens when you sprinkle some salt on the cucumber? You find that after some time, see, there is some water in the plate that is having the cucumber slices. Okay, you slice some cucumber, put some water over, put some salt over it, sprinkle some salt over it, and after some time you will observe that there is water in the plate. From where that water has came? You just added the salt. From where that water came? So there was higher water concentration inside the cell, and now this water has moved from the cell to outside where it was solutes were there and no water was less. Okay, water was less or very less or no water was there. So from a region of higher water concentration, the water has moved to a region of lower water concentration by the process of osmosis, and when the water is moving out of the plasma membrane, that process is known as exosmosis. Now, always remember, wherever there is exo word, means something is coming out. Always remember that. If you learn the meaning of these terms, that will make your learning very easy. In 10th standard, you will learn about exothermic reactions, where heat will be coming out. So, remember that wherever exo word is there, means something is coming out. So, here exosmosis means water is coming from the cell to outside. What is moving outside the cell? That process is known as exosmosis. Why this water is moving out of the cell? Because there was less water outside and there was more water inside. Means we have placed our cell in a hypertonic solution. What is such a solution known as? That solution is known as a hypertonic solution. Means a solution that is having less water but more solute is there. So, such a solution is known as hypertonic solution, and whenever we place our cell in a hypertonic solution, there is exit of water from the cell. Means the water is going to come outside the cell, and that process is known as exosmosis. Now, when the water comes out of the cell, what will happen to the cell? The cell constituents are going to shrink. So, whatever the contents are there in the cell, the organelle still will be there, but that cytoplasm will be having now less amount of water in it. And so, our cell is going to shrink in this condition. What will happen to our cell? The cell is going to shrink in this situation. Okay. The reverse also happens sometimes. I'll tell you an example. That is, whenever we place we put some resins in kheer. Okay. So, whenever you put some resins, that is kishmish, in kheer or in water, you find that the resins swell up. They just gain the water, they just get that water inside their cells and they are going to swell up. So, such a movement of water into the cells, when the water is moving into the cells, it's known as endosmosis. Here also, osmosis. Here also remember that endo word means something is moving inside. Endo andar, ऐसे याद कर लेना. So when water is moving inside the cells, that is known as endosmosis. Okay. When this is going to happen? This is going to happen when we place our cell in a hypotonic solution. What is a hypotonic solution? A solution that is having more water in it. More water is there and less solutes are there. Such a solution is known as a hypotonic solution. So, whenever we place a cell in a hypotonic solution, then what will happen? That the water from the solution, because the solution was having more water. So, the water will be moving from the area where there was more water to the area where there was less water. And you know that raisins are the dried grapes. So, they are not having enough water. They are having very little water. So, water from outside environment is going to move inside the cells, and that process is known as endosmosis. Now, what will happen to a cell when there is endosmosis? The cell is going to swell up. Okay. So, a cell is going to swell up because of that water coming inside the cell. Okay. Now, I would like to tell you one extra thing, that if this is an animal cell, then if we just keep it on adding some water, then that cell can even burst because of water. It's just like a water balloon. So, if you keep on adding water, if you just keep on increasing the water, that what will happen? Balloon is going to swell up, but a limit is there. If you keep on adding water to that, time will come that the balloon is going to burst. Similarly, an animal cell also bursts if there is excess of endosmosis. But in case of plant cell, the cell is not going to burst. Resins come from plants, so they are not going to burst. The cells are not going to burst in case of plant cell, because in plant cell, the plasma membrane is surrounded by another layer, and that is known as cell wall. We'll learn about the cell wall in the next class. So right now just remember that a plant cell is not going to burst even if it's placed in a hypotonic solution, because plasma membrane is surrounded by a cell wall. Okay. Now, we have seen about exosmosis, the water coming out of the cell. We have seen about endosmosis, water entering into the cell. Third type of solution could be isotonic solution. Means if the concentration of water is same outside the cell as well as inside the cell, if it is exactly the same, then what is going to happen? Then water is going to come out of the cell and the same amount of water is going to enter into the cell. Okay, the water will be continuously moving in and out of the cell, but net effect on the cell will be zero. Means when the cell is placed in an isotonic solution, isotonic is a solution that is having the same concentration as that of the cell. So in case a cell is placed in an isotonic solution, then there will be movement of water in and out of the cell, but whatever is the amount of water entering into the cell, same amount of water will be moving out of the cell, and so the net effect of that will be zero. That will be cancelled out. The cell will neither shrink nor it is going to swell up. The cell size is going to remain the same. The cell size remains the same in case of isotonic solution. Okay, so that is about osmosis. The plasma membrane is even flexible. This plasma membrane in some organisms, in some of the cells, is really very flexible. One such example of that is the amoeba. In amoeba, the food is taken through this plasma membrane only. The food is engulfed through this plasma membrane only, and that shows that this plasma membrane is flexible. And this process of taking the food through the plasma membrane in case of amoeba, it's known as endocytosis. That is known as endocytosis. Very easy to remember. Endo means something is going inside the cell. Endo means under. And cytos word means cell. So something is going inside the cell. Okay. So the food is moving into the cell in case of amoeba through the plasma membrane, and that process is known as endoosmosis. I told you that in plants, the absorption of water by the roots is also by the process of osmosis only. Okay, so by the process of osmosis only, the roots are able to absorb the water from the soil, and that we will be learning later in another chapter. But right now you should remember up to this. Okay, so that's all for this class. That's all for today. I hope you were able to understand the topic. If you like the contents, just please share it with your friends and help me spread knowledge. Apart from that, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. That's all for today. Good day, everyone.